Justice and accountability. More than a year after a harrowing attack that shocked this country, brought the ongoing threat of political violence to the forefront, a jury today found David DePape guilty on 2 counts: attempted kidnap of a federal official and assault on the immediate family member of a federal official, for attacking the husband of Nancy Pelosi, Paul Pelosi, with a hammer in their San Francisco home back in October of last year. DePape now faces life in prison. In a statement, former Speaker Nancy Pelosi says, quote, Speaker Pelosi and her family are deeply grateful for the outpouring of prayers and warm wishes from Mr. Pelosi from so many across the country during this difficult time. The Pelosi family is very proud of their pop, who demonstrated extraordinary composure and courage on the night of the attack a year ago and in the courtroom this week. On the stand, Paul Pelosi testified that he felt in immediate danger when DePape arrived at his doorstep in the middle of the night. From NBC News, quote, the door opened and a very large man came in with a hammer in one hand and some ties in the other. And he said, "Where's Nancy?" As I think that woke me up, Pelosi testified. I'm asleep and he burst in the door and that woke me up. Pelosi sustained a fractured skull. David DePape took the stand as well, revealing a mind that had been radicalized and poisoned by right-wing conspiracy theories. He said he had targets, including Hunter Biden, California Governor Gavin Newsom, and former Vice President Mike Pence. And he said that he wanted to confront Nancy Pelosi about Russia's involvement in the 2016 election. DePape and his defense team never denied that he attacked Paul Pelosi. Instead, they mounted a narrow defense. The Washington Post reports the key question in the federal case was whether DePape did those things because of Nancy Pelosi's performance of her job representing San Francisco in Congress. After about 9 hours of deliberations over 2 days, the jury found that he did. And that is where we start today with former Assistant Director for Counterintelligence at the FBI, Frank Figliuzzi, plus former Congressman from Florida and MSNBC political analyst David Jolly. And with me at the table, former top prosecutor at the Department of Justice, now an MSNBC legal analyst and host of my favorite podcast, Andrew Weissmann. Frank, let's start with you. Your reaction to this verdict.
Yeah, look, the conviction of DePape is really 2 stories in one. It's the tale of online radicalization, and it's a fascinating tale to study and what happens when someone acts out on online radicalization. And it's also the tale of how those who radicalized him respond when someone does their bidding. So in this case, we saw, and you don't have to believe me, just listen to DePape's testimony, listen to what interviewing agents and officers took down when they interviewed him. He'll tell you the story. He was radicalized online. He was a QAnon believer. He was all in on the most ludicrous conspiracy theories that are out there. He was all in on it, and he's told us about that. And then look at how, after Paul Pelosi was attacked, how the far right, how those online in the media who helped radicalize him, how they responded. They laughed. They joked. They didn't believe it. They told their viewers that wasn't us. They made jokes about Nancy Pelosi. They implied things that were simply not in evidence. And that's where we are. And as recently as last weekend, former President Trump, running again for president, laughed and joked about Pelosi, the 2 of them, at a rally.
And I want to talk about those comments from Trump and from others in the Republican Party. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the legal strategy here, because as I understand it, this was the defense's Hail Mary strategy. They were going to argue that DePape was in an alternate reality, that this was not about the fact that Nancy Pelosi was a member of Congress. And in doing so, their hope was that it would be tried at the state level and not the federal level. To me, that seems relevant both in terms of this case and in terms of a lot of the 1-6 cases where you've had judges say, I'm not even sure I can apply the maximum sentencing here because this person is not tethered to reality.
Yeah, I think there's sort of a couple things going on. I think one of the things that people might be confused by in your introduction, which got it totally right, is that they might be saying, I don't understand. This guy breaks in, he's got a hammer, he assaults this guy. What do you mean federal? Like, who cares why he did it? He attacked this guy. As long as he attacked him with the intent to attack him, isn't it game over? And the answer to that is at the state level, where he is facing charges, that would be the case. And so you have a separate state system where if he's charged with assault and he did it intentionally, he can be convicted. At the federal level, you need some hook as to why it's a federal crime. And here there's sort of this extra element. Did he do this because of Nancy Pelosi's federal position? Was that part of the motivation? And so that's why the defense said this isn't a whodunit, it's a whydunit. So at the federal level, you can make that argument. At the state level, I think the defense will be, as you said, has got to be essentially he's nuts. Like he doesn't really have the mental state to form the intent to have done this. I think that will be a hard argument because he took the stand in the federal case. And while he had all sorts of delusions and he had all sorts of conspiracy theories, he articulated why he was there. Right. And so it's going to be hard now at the state level to, where he is facing charges to figure out what exactly his defense will be there.
So let me ask you, given that we are living in this sprawling legal landscape, specifically around this question of political violence, both those who incite and then those who react to that incitement. Right. If you're any of the other defense teams or you're any of the other prosecutors, what did you learn from this case?
So I'm not sure you can go from this case to the January 6th case. The proof here was overwhelming. And remember, the police, when they came in, had not only saw it themselves, they saw the attack. One of the outrageous things here is that the defendant acted with the police standing at the door. So even without the cameras they had, because a lot of this was recorded, so you had the testimony of Paul Pelosi, you had the testimony of the agents, but you also then had most of this on video. So it is true that in the January 6th case, there are snippets of video, but that sort of is a very different case. And I don't think the issue there of what's your motive, which happens here, doesn't play as well. And that's why you've seen so many convictions, even in the January 6th cases, as you see here. David
Jolly, that image that Andrew Weissmann references, right, that where we saw the door open and you saw Paul Pelosi there with David, it is burned on our collective brains. I want you to take a listen, with that in mind, to what Donald Trump said just 2 weeks ago about Paul Pelosi.
We'll stand up to crazy Nancy Pelosi, who ruined San Francisco. How's her husband doing, by the way? Anybody know? And she's against building a wall at our border, even though she has a wall around her house, which obviously didn't do a very good job.
To paraphrase the current president, no one who makes that type of remark is worthy of the office of the presidency. I have to imagine, given that we have seen Donald Trump watch other people receive punishment for the language, the fact that he's under multiple gag orders, it tells me that today's verdict does not make the rhetoric stop. What do you think?
Yeah, it certainly does not. And, what is also unsettling is the crowd's reaction, their affirmation, their finding humor in the attack. And to your point, Alicia, this was an attack where the video and the audio is real and you get to experience it. And as Frank said, the far right and the conservative underworld jumped out with all these crazy, wild theories to kind of soften what should have been a national moment and make light of it. And you see Donald Trump continuing to do it today. I think the most important thing about that is we know from our domestic intelligence agencies over the past several years that the rise in politically motivated domestic violence is real. Homeland violence is real. And so in this situation, you have a moment where leaders of all political persuasions, all partisan persuasions, could come out and condemn it, but also could say, here is my plan if I am to be president to combat political violence. But that's not what you're seeing. You're seeing the Republican Party make light of it, laugh about it, insult the former speaker and her husband at a time of critical national import. The rise in political violence is real. In this case, it resulted in the attack on the former speaker's husband, who fortunately survived. But what happens the next time? We don't know.
Frank, I'm thinking about all of this in the context of what we heard from Ray and Mayorkas this week, right? Talking about the sprawling threats against the homeland. Talk to me specifically about the effect of comments like the one you just heard it from Trump just a few weeks ago.
We have a solid track record now. The path is well worn between rhetoric from the far right, from Donald Trump, and extreme violence, even fatal violence. And we can go on and on for the next hour, if you'd like, from the church, the black church in South Carolina, and that shooter, from the Walmart El Paso shooter who bought into the brown invaders theory, to the Buffalo supermarket shooter who similarly thought we were being replaced. It's all coming from this echo chamber that people can't get out of. And I've got to say, for those who say and seem to dismiss all of this as mental illness, these people are mentally ill. It's not us. We're not doing this. We're kind of okay with it. But understand, we can't possibly anticipate the actions of someone who's mentally unstable. I say this, you absolutely can, because there's a track record of it, and a long list of people who might absolutely be mentally unstable, but who respond with extreme violence to the rhetoric that is continuously spewed from these far-right echo chambers. So someday we're going to see a lot of lawsuits when they can pinpoint the verbiage in someone's writings and rantings and the violence to the people who spewed it, and there will be consequences